All right, we're on. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Impact Series. I am Sneha, your host for the Impact Series. And for those in the audience that are new here, I head our business value and analytics department at ObserveAI. Today, we're joined by our guest expert, Ragesh Natarajan. I'm going to pass it over to him for a quick introduction before we start talking everything about, the operational challenges and the reality of, your foundational readiness for AI in CX. Ragesh, over to you.
Hi, Sneha. Thank you for having me at ObserveAI's Impact series. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Ragesh Natarajan, based in New Jersey, and I lead global AI and data for the customer care service line at Genpact. Our vision is simple but bold. We are moving from human driven workloads to AI driven workloads, and from self service to experiences that are truly served by AI. So at Genpact, we are building intelligent, proactive AI ecosystems that is designed to deliver outcomes at scale. In my role, I drive end-to-end customer experience transformation through our agentic AI framework, combining Gen AI, automation, and intelligent service design to enable truly autonomous AI native operations.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, Ragesh. For the audience, in terms of what we're going to cover for this session, we hear a lot of noise in the industry about AI and CX. And I think I want to kick this discussion off by asking you, Ragesh, from your point of view. It feels like a lot of these leaders are now in a situation which is almost do or die with AI deployments. And from where you sit at Genpact, what are you seeing is the biggest delta between the boardroom expectations of AI and what the reality on the contact center floor is?
Yeah, this is a great question, Sneha. At the boardroom level, there is a strong and well founded belief that AI can fundamentally redefine customer experience, whether that's through autonomous service, real time decisioning, or truly personalized interactions at scale. However, when you look at the operational layer, today many organizations are still working through foundational challenges, particularly around data consistency, structure, and governance. For example, there isn't always a canonical data model. So, key metrics like resolution rates are defined differently across CRM, telephony, and QA platforms. We are also seeing that data definitions are not harmonized, which creates conflicting signals for AI models, and ownership of data quality is often fragmented rather than managed, right, end to end. And importantly, many organizations are still evolving towards a semantic layer that can unify structured and unstructured data into meaningful, actionable context. As a result, while the ambition is to move towards autonomous AI driven CX, the underlying systems are not always fully aligned to support that vision at scale. So the way we approach this is very pragmatic. We start by auditing the gap between the data that exists today and the data required to power AI effectively. We then focus on building a governed data foundation with strong semantic layering and a robust RAG architecture, so that AI can operate on consistent, contextual, and trusted information. Ultimately, sustainable AI transformation in a CX is not just about deploying advanced models, it's about ensuring your data ecosystem is ready to support intelligent and end-to-end decisioning. So my take here is the organizations that scale AI successfully are the ones that treat data as a strategic asset, not just as an operational byproduct.
Yeah, I love that. So you touched upon a few really
Hmm.
important points here, right? So you talked about organizations not having standardized data definitions, not having
Hmm.
clear ownership. you also talked about, and this was the next question that I was going to ask you around, if the organizations don't have this data readiness, what are your recommendations to bridge that gap? But I like that you already started talking about, I think what you said was building on a governed data foundation with strong semantic layers. Are there
Mhm.
other recommendations that you have around how can organizations start building towards this foundation for readiness?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sneha, on bridging the gap. And the way we advise organizations is to approach this in a very structured manner, AI first, but data led manner. First, it starts with standardization, meaning before scaling AI, organizations need a common data framework with clearly defined guardrails and data quality rules so that the inputs going into AI are consistent, governed, and trusted across systems. Second is data quality and reliability by design. This means putting in place controls to ensure AI is working with clean, validated, and contextual data, minimizing risks like incorrect outputs or hallucinations. AI should not just be powerful, it should be predictable and enterprise safe. Third, organizations need to invest in observability, which is very critical, right? You need the ability to continuously monitor how AI models are performing, what data they are using, how decisions are being made, and where there are deviations. So, this creates a feedback loop to improve accuracy, compliance, and performance over time. And finally, all of this comes together through a governed architecture, typically a strong semantic layer, as I talked about in your previous question,
Yeah.
combined with a RAG framework that will ensure AI responses are grounded in enterprise for knowledge and real time data, right? So, in enterprise CX, trust is the currency, and that comes from governed, observable, and reliable AI.
Okay, yeah, love that. So, assuming that you have organizations who say they've fixed their foundation, they have a pretty solid foundation, they, have the data infrastructure, they have the governance, ownership, the data quality audits, everything is in place. I think the second piece that we're seeing in the industry is, even when they have good foundations, they struggle to narrow down the use cases they actually need to apply AI to, right? Right now, it feels very much like, a blind chase that, hey, because AI, everybody is, moving ahead with AI, we need to deploy this across all use cases. And I
Mhm.
personally, from my experience, feel like that's a disaster waiting to happen, because you really need to narrow down and understand what use case is going to truly move the needle for you. So when there are so many different use cases of AI in CX and the bandwidth is limited, how should leaders be thinking about use case selection?
That's a very real challenge. And in my experience, the mistake organizations make is trying to boil the ocean with AI. The way we guide leaders is to anchor use case selection on three clearer lenses. First is business impact, focus on areas with high volume, high cost, or high customer friction. Think of journeys like disputes, payments, account servicing, where even small improvements can drive meaningful cost savings and CX uplift. Second is the process determinism and data readiness. Start with use cases that are very well defined, repeatable, and have clean data inputs. So these are far easier to automate end to end and deliver faster ROI. And third is critical end to end ownership, right? Don't just optimize one step in the journey, prioritize use cases where you can drive front to back transformation, not just incremental gains. That's where AI truly unlocks value. At Genpact, we are also bringing a structured gating approach where we evaluate use cases across impact, feasibility, risk, and scalability so leaders can make objective data driven decisions rather than chasing the latest trend. So I would say the winners are not the ones with the most AI use cases, but ones with the most impactful and scalable ones.
Yeah, I love that. And I think even with a lot of other leaders that we've spoken to, um, in terms of the qualification criteria for, where you need to apply AI, we've repeatedly heard about it could be low complexity, low emotion use cases, or it could be very black and white logic, rule based, deterministic use cases. Um,
Hmm.
it could also be ones where that the AI agents will be able to execute the task end to end, right? Without human intervention. So all of those are in line with what we're hearing in the industry too. So for the audience, just a quick recap. We talked about, diagnosing your data foundations. We talked about, how do you bridge that gap if you're not already there from a maturity perspective. And then from there on, once you have the solid foundation, how do you think about use case selection? Now, the next piece that I want to get into is, say you've identified the use cases that you want to chase or apply AI to. Now is the most challenging part. And this is where you start thinking about, who do I do this with, right?
Hmm.
So one, there is the build versus buy argument. A lot of times we're seeing a lot of companies invest in third party vendors around here. So from a vendor landscape, in AI and CX, it's getting very crowded. You have new companies popping up almost every other day. So how should organizations be thinking about vendor selection? What would you say are some of the primary criterias or qualifications that anybody trying to make this decision should actually be looking for?
Yeah, that's a critical inflection point. And honestly, this is where many organizations either accelerate value or create long term complexity. The way we guide leaders is to move beyond feature comparison and evaluate vendors across five very practical dimensions. First is data integration capability. Can the solution work seamlessly with your existing data architecture, or will it force you to rebuild around it? The best solutions adapt to your ecosystem, not the other way around. Second is configuration versus customization. How much of the capability is ready out of the box for your industry and use case versus requiring heavy professional services? Now, that directly impacts both cost and speed. Third is governance and compliance. In today's environment, AI must be enterprise safe. So, you need vendors with built in guardrails, explainability, and auditability, not something you have to bolt on later. Fourth is time to value, right? Not the sales promise, but the realistic deployment timeline to measurable outcomes. So leaders should prioritize solutions that can show impact in weeks, and not years. And finally, it's interoperability. How well does the solution integrate with your existing stack, your CCaaS platforms, CRMs, workforce management platforms, and data platforms? Because CX transformation is never a rip and replace exercise. So we look at this holistically. We combine hyperscaler native platforms with an orchestration layer, so clients get both flexibility and scale. Ultimately, the right vendor is not the one with the most features. I would say it's one that fits into your ecosystem, scales with your ambition, and delivers value predictability. So in customer experience, with AI in forefront, integration and execution matter far more than innovation in isolation, I would say.
Yeah, I love that. You hit on a bunch of critical points there. And although we are a vendor in this space, we always think about, hey, as a prospect, as a customer, at the end of the day, you need to select what's going to fit, your use cases the best. Um, I think that's a great segue into the next section that we have, and which is around rethinking CX principles, right? So assuming you have your foundation use cases vendor, everybody logged in, I think towards the end you said something really important, Ragesh, and that was, you talked about CX transformation is not a rip and replace exercise, right? And what we're seeing is there's a version of AI in CX where it's basically automation layered on top of a process that was designed 15 years ago, right?
Mm.
So even a lot of companies who have lived on, legacy IVRs are looking at deploying AI solutions as a rip and replace exercise. And I think even in the past discussions that we've had, you've been pretty vocal about, the distinction between that, and how everybody needs to start thinking about redesigning how CX as a function, as a domain operates. So would love to understand your take on what does that distinction look like between, basic layering basic automation over legacy workflows versus actually rethinking how the different teams, different functions, how we operate in general.
Yeah, that's exactly where the real transformation begins, and it's an important distinction. What we often see is organizations layering AI on top of legacy processes, hoping to automate what already exists. But the reality is, if the underlying process is broken, AI will only accelerate that dysfunction. Right? True transformation requires a fundamental redesign of the operating model. So it's about rethinking how customer interactions, agent roles, and operational decisions are connected end to end, not optimizing them in isolation. So, for example, instead of assisting an agent during a call, you should ask you ask, should that interaction even require a human at all, right? Can a AI agent handle intake, decisioning, and resolution autonomously with humans only stepping in for exceptions? So this is the shift from assisted service to autonomous agentic CX, where workflows are designed for front to back office execution, not fragmented handoffs. And the organizations seeing the biggest returns are the ones treating AI not as a tool, but as a trigger to redesign how customer service fundamentally operates. So we call this moving towards a self resolving AI native service model where intelligence, context, and action come together seamlessly across the journey. So ultimately, the value of AI is not in doing the same thing faster, it's in doing fundamentally different things better.
Oh, I love that. That's a great quote. Okay, yeah. That's amazing. So I think the other piece to this, other side of the coin to this is, we all talk a lot about, redesigning what the customer journey is going to look like, redesigning for the outcome, which is the customer experience. Um, we don't see a lot of people talking about redesigning EX, that's the employee experience, right? We do think that, as like, I'll give you a simple example with my own team and the responsibilities that we are taking on now. The market has changed so much, so many responsibilities that we used to do 2 years ago are probably some things that can be automated right now. And so there's been an evolution in how we as a team, as a structure, as a role, bring in our expertise. So I think the same principle applies even to the human agents who are delivering that experience for customer satisfaction, right? So when you think about redesigning CX from ground up, how is the agent role actually changing? Because there's a version of conversation which is all about technology, and then there is a version about what happens to humans when this technology evolves. So would love to hear what your thoughts are on, you know thinking redesigning principles from ground up, especially around employee experience.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a critical point because this transformation is as much about people as it's about technology. What we are seeing is a shift from agents being task executors to decision orchestrators. AI takes over repetitive rule based work intake, lookups, basic resolutions, while agents focus on exceptions, complex scenarios, and high empathy interactions, right? So their role evolves to supervising AI, making judgment calls, and driving better outcomes rather than just handling volume. So, this is not about replacing humans, it's about elevating their role to where they can add the most value. In fact, the best performing organizations are investing in agents as AI augmented knowledge workers. So, that's my take on today's evolution of agent roles.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Um, so if the agent roles are also evolving, I think the immediate next thing that follows is the measurement system, right? So traditionally, we've evaluated agents on the number of calls that they take, what's their handle time, what's their NPS, CSAT, etc. And I think now a lot of organizations are still tracking CSAT, they're still tracking, NPS, AHT, and I don't see that going away, but I do see that being supplemented by, more, I would say, diverse and deeper metrics. So as we move towards agentic operations, where AI is doing a lot of the work, so how should leaders start thinking about measurement models?
Yeah, rethinking CX metrics is a great point because traditional metrics like AHT or even CSAT were designed for a human driven model, right? In an AI led world, leaders need to shift towards outcome based metrics like autonomous resolution rate, call containment, decision accuracy, and end to end cycle time. So, equally important is measuring customer effort and journey completion, not just individual interactions. Success is no longer about how effectively you handle a call, it's about how effectively you resolve the customer's need end to end, often without a call at all.
Yeah.
So the traditional metrics are going to change, as we all know, because of AI agents. So there's going to be a lot of new metrics that is going to shape the customer experience in coming days.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me to the next question. And this again is something that I'm seeing a lot in the industry. So as much as there is a division in the different solutions and applicability of AI to different use cases, I think the metrics are also getting considered in isolation, right? So let's say, you have AI agents. Now with AI agents, there are metrics like what's the resolution rate, what's the containment rate, what's the customer effort score, etc. And then if you have like a co-pilot, then there are what's the ramp time to productivity for new hires? Did that reduce over time? When you're looking at post interaction or conversational intelligence, AHT, etc., still are the key metrics. Where I'm getting with this is I think most organizations are still operating or optimizing channels in silos, right? There is a huge advantage of omni-channel integration with AI. So we've seen, for voice, like voice does voice, digital does, self-service. So what does it look like to design an entire journey as one connected system where AI orchestrates the best path for each interaction in real time?
Yeah. I'm actually loving the AI orchestrated journeys. What this really means is moving from channel centric to journey centric customer experience. Instead of optimizing voice or digital in silos, AI now becomes the orchestration layer, understanding the customer intent, context, and the history in real time, and dynamically choosing the best path. So, a journey might start with an AI driven interaction, transition to voice only if needed, and complete in the back office without the customer ever repeating themselves. So that's the shift from managing channels to delivering one seamless AI served experience end to end. Customers don't think in channels now, and with AI, they no longer have to.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, that's awesome. I think we've covered so many different points, in a short span of time as part of this session today. I do want to make sure that, the audience um, feels feels like, they're able to take away a lot of information from the session. First, Ragesh, I want to thank you for taking the time to
Yeah.
share about your viewpoint on, how organizations should start thinking about AI deployments, how they should start thinking about foundational readiness to deploy AI successfully. For the audience, this is what futuristic CX is going to look like, right? So it's not it's not a switch where, hey, let me just purchase a vendor, let me purchase a solution, I just deploy it and then magic happens. There's a lot of interconnectedness in you being able to see that return on investment, and for that you need to work on, diagnosing your foundation. You need to make sure that, you have clear lines of ownership, accountability across different teams. You need to ensure that, the data definitions are standard.
Yeah.
You need to ensure that, you have a governed data layer, a governed structure, with semantic layering. Not just that, you also need to, like, if you do have a foundation that is strong, you also need to work with the right stakeholders in understanding where AI is truly going to move the needle for you, right?
Yeah.
Which use case is relevant for your organization. And what I mean by that is, if you are in the healthcare space, you might see a lot of, other companies chasing appointment scheduling as the first use case for automation, but that may
Yeah.
not necessarily apply to you, right? And so you need to think about what's going to benefit, your company based on where your company is in the maturity stage. Which use
Mm.
case do you want to pick up? Do you want to pick up a low complexity use case because that's going to be less of a risk for you to experiment with? Then go for a low complexity use case. If you are chasing a specific KPI, like, hey, I want to apply automation because in the next 60 days my goal is to, shave off 30 seconds or 40 seconds of information gathering, then you go find an intent, that will help you solve that purpose. So
Yeah.
define, narrow down your use cases. And then once you have the use cases, of course, Rakesh gave a lot of good points around vendor selection. Do your due diligence, right? So you have a lot of flashy vendors in the market, but at the end of the day, you want to pick a vendor who is not just, going to hand you the solution, but is able to help partner with you on standing that solution up and invest it in your long-term success. And then, rethinking CX principles from ground up. A lot of good points there. You essentially need to redesign how your function operates today to make sure that you're able to leverage AI to its best. Um, I think there were a lot of points, but I tried my best to, like, recap. Do want to pass it over to you, Ragesh, if you have any final closing thoughts for the audience here.
Thanks, Neha. You summarized it pretty well. You covered all the points. If I had to call out one defining factor, it's this: the organizations that succeed treat AI as a continuous operating model shift, not a project. And that's what leads into the future of CX. We are moving towards a world of AI served, self resolving customer experiences where interactions are proactive, journeys are orchestrated end to end, and the outcomes are delivered with minimal friction. Where AI doesn't just assist service, it becomes the service layer itself, with humans focusing on oversight, empathy, and complex decisions. And the organizations that embrace this shift early are the ones that will truly redefine customer experience at scale. So that's how I would
I love
close
that.
this.
I think that's the best way to, summarize this entire discussion that we've had today. Thank you for that. And thank you to the audience for taking the time to, tune into this webinar. We will be sending a recording post the session, and we look forward to the next Impact series. Thank you so much, Ragesh.
Thank you, Sneha. Thanks, ObserveAI team, for having me.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful day.